Good morning and welcome back to Theme 1, a cultural shift towards BIM. We have three speakers this morning. Michael O'Shea of UCC will be looking at enhancing asset management for offshore lighthouses utilizing BIM integrated sensor analysis. We have a presentation of the UK on the UK BIM Framework from David Churcher, and also a presentation from Dr. Mark Kelly in GMIT on enabling a twin transition digitalization for a circular built environment. So Michael, when you're ready, you might share your slides and we can commence.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Gathering 21. My name is Michael O'Shea and I'm a lecturer in civil engineering in the School of Engineering in University College of Cork. I'm also research at MARI, which is the SFI Centre for Energy, Climate and the Marine. And today my talk is about how we integrate sensor analysis with offshore structures and in particular lighthouses. So my presentation, basically, I'll go into a little bit of background and where this sits in the BIM landscape. I'll discuss some case studies that we took inspiration from in our own study. Then I'll get into the meat of the study, which is the lighthouse asset management with BIM, with a particular focus on the Kish Lighthouse. And then I'll discuss some future projects and some next steps into the project. So as a researcher, what I'm interested in really is in terms of BIM dimensions, I'm really interested in the 60 and 70 areas. So around sustainability and around facility management, beyond, I guess, beyond the building site, beyond construction stage. And BIM and facilities management has several arms. Repair and renovation, operations and maintenance, which will be the focus of today's talk, is a focus of a lot of our research. But we're also looking at the sustainability goals and how they can be achieved through integrated sensors and BIM and facility management, integrating all those three areas of activity. And I guess what we're going to see and probably see over the next couple of days is how occupation comfort and occupant health and safety is going to come to the fore in the coming years, given the global pandemic and how important knowing what our building health is going to be like, and equally so space management is going to come into that conversation. So this talk is all about the Kish Lighthouse in particular. It's a lighthouse that I first became familiar with in 2015 when I was working in industry for Malachy Walsh and Partners, where we had to design a repair strategy and schedule for the lighthouse. There was several structural issues that came to the fore, and one of those issues, a couple of those issues, required a more long-term monitoring solution, and I'll get into that as we go through the presentation. But that is the focus of today's presentation. So prior to going into that, I'd like to discuss a couple of studies that we took inspiration from. One is about structural health monitoring and damage detection, how to understand how to integrate damage detection into a BIM environment with structural health monitoring. And then looking at structural monitoring and sensors and how to integrate sensors in a BIM environment. Then we'll look at an interesting study on building management and how building management and sensors were integrated, particularly around environmental parameters, internal environmental parameters. And to tie all this together, I suppose, and to get to that BIM 3D level where we have interoperable data, there's been a lot of work in academia on developing new IFC schemas so we can all have the data interactive and transactable. So the first case study is coming from the States about 3 or 4 years ago, where they looked at cataloging bridge deck damage and how to represent that in a BIM environment for, I guess, a global view of what was happening in Colorado in terms of bridges. They had a lot of failures or near failures, and they wanted to get a handle on what was causing them and what the patterns and trends were. So they integrated they created digital models of their structures, and they began representing different types of damage to understand what the damage causes were and whether there are patterns coming from a whole host of bridges across the state. So quite a nice application. That's something we've taken inspiration from. The next study is I guess further along the path in the idea of structural health monitoring and cataloging, and this study by Delgado et al. Looked at integrating live sensors into both the virtual and physical environment, and they took a case study, Steel Railway Bridge, where they actually modeled in a BIM environment the live sensors, and we're able to feed the data back into the BIM, creating a digital twin of the structure they were interested in. And what they were able to produce was live real-time strain measurements from the strain gauge that were embedded into the bridge. So again, a very useful study to be able to analyze and visualize what was happening in real time, and also had a cataloging feature where you could look at the worst cases over the monitoring period. Again, something we've taken inspiration from. So moving away from infrastructure and looking at building environmental sensors, because lighthouses, I guess, are part infrastructure and part building environment, and both of them come together, I guess, quite significantly in the offshore sense. This study in China looked at automating, so Internet of Things type sensors, and being able to visualize the results, but also to feed back into decision support facility and facilities management. So they focused on occupant comfort in a campus, in a college campus, utilizing low-cost sensors such as Arduino sensors. They monitored temperature, humidity, and CO2. So again, this was undertaken in 2018, so it was pre-COVID, but you'll see a lot of these studies coming up in the next 2 or 3 years, where these low-cost sensors are being placed in every workplace, probably in the country at the moment. But what they did is actually they created a virtual world, so a building environment information model of those sensors, and were able to assess the comfort, the energy saving, and also something called the WELL standard, which is an occupant comfort type standard. And on top of that, they built a decision support layer, so they were able to react to what was being shown in the virtual world and be able to react in the physical world. So by creating these constraints of what was the ideal conditions, if the conditions went beyond that, if it became too warm, too cold, if the light changed, the architecture they created was able to react and either turn on like a building management system, be able to turn on air conditioning where required, but it was down to the level, to the room level, and almost to the person level. So really exciting type of research, which I think will take off over the next couple of years. And my final case study, just to kind of cover how we integrate all this work. Integrating structural health monitoring and live sensors in the BIM environment. Everyone is doing their own thing at the moment. So there's a lot of research in Germany coming out on how to actually standardize this and bring it into an IFC schema extension. So in the next couple of IFC schemas, you'll probably see some more wireless sensor nodes and maybe some integration along how to integrate, I guess, live sensors into your BIM environment. So that's really important work. So we don't have a lot of variability going forward. So the Kish Lighthouse, it's an interesting one. It's something I've been interested, I guess, since 2015. It's 10 kilometers from Dunleary Harbour. That's where it's a primary aid to navigation for the entrance to Dublin Port. So it's quite an important aid to navigation, and not only that, but it's also a very important Meta-Ocean recording station. The construction, it was constructed in 1960. It's quite innovative. It's constructed using a series of 2 concentric caissons. So the foundation was created by casting a reinforced concrete bed, which was initially floating. It was casted in Dunleary Harbour. It was then sunk to the seabed in Dunleary, and the inner tower was built inside the foundation caisson. This was all then floated and positioned into place over the Kish bank, and it was ballasted and placed on a pre-prepared bed. And from there, the real innovation happened. It was filled with water, and the combination of buoyancy and post-tension steel cables, the internal tower, which was completely fitted out, was locked into position. It was then grouted along this annulus here, and this whole area here was backfilled with sand, which was it was a really innovative construction methodology at the time. 50 years later, 60 years later, nearly at this stage, it has led to some structural health issues, which we'll get into in a minute. So our first pass using the Kish Lighthouse BIM model in research was to undertake something like the first study I mentioned, and undertake a damage detection and visualization study, where the Revit model was populated with a series of damage identifiers. And this really helped catalogue all the work that had been done on the Kish over its 60-year lifetime. There was 3 large structural assessment reports, one in 1980, one in the mid-90s, and one in 2015. So all that body of work was captured in a 3D in a 3D model, and enabled the Irish Lights to be able to visualize where the trends were. These, I guess, structural repairs preceded the careers or outlived the careers of many of the attendants. So you could see the intergenerational changes in terms of where the damage was occurring, and they could identify patterns and develop, I guess, augment their maintenance strategies as a result of this. So a reasonably simple exercise, but very valuable in terms of asset management. So I mentioned in 2015, I was involved in the design team that undertook maintenance and repair design of the Kish Lighthouse, but 2 structural health issues persisted that couldn't be sorted in I guess, the term of the contract, and really required longer term monitoring. And this is where the idea of embedding sensors into the lighthouse came about. So one of the issues was a rocking about either the annulus or the base. The tower was recorded to rock in strong winds, and the mode of rocking wasn't exactly clear. So they weren't sure if the tower was rocking relative to the base, or if the entire lighthouse was rocking itself. So that required some monitoring. There was also this latent pressure signal in the foundation of the tower. So if you imagine, this is the tower section here, as I showed in the construction slide. This space here should have been backfilled with sand all the ways down. But what they were actually finding was there was a head of water there. So this is a boroscope that was placed in 2019, when they actually recorded quite a strong head of water, and the source of which is unknown, because theoretically this is all sealed from the environment and from the outside, from the sea outside. So there's quite a strong pressure head there. So that was another reason to adopt a sensor, long-term structural health sensor monitoring plan. So what we developed was a sensor network that included some existing sensors, so wind, wave, and tides that were existing, and we introduced some new sensors, so pressure and vibration. These were all collated in a database using Dynamo. And then in the virtual environment, we were able to undertake some structural health analysis. We as I mentioned, some damage visualization, and also looking at how to extend the design life, which is the ultimate goal of the study. It also helped the Irish Lights to enable maintenance planning. So I'll just mention Dynamo quickly. It's something we use to take the sensor data from the cloud down into the virtual environment. And this is a kind of an overall scheme of where we'd like to get with this sensor system. So we have these external sensors at the moment. They're from using a Python script. They're being implemented into our BIM environment. We have a pressure sensor, and we have some geophones. We're hoping to add accelerometers and an in situ wave gauge to shed more light into the issues, I guess, the structural monitoring issues. So one of the initial results is at the base of the tower, where we've identified that the pressure signal coming out of that boroscope actually has a tidal signal, so which indicates there is a link to the outside, which is probably cause for concern. But what we need to do now is install more sensors and understand what the amounts are and how closely linked this is to the tidal, and that'll determine what size damage could potentially at the tower, and what are the long-term effects. There's more details on that in a publication we did last year on the Kish. So the next steps for this project is really to add more sensors. Irish Lights are also looking at decarbonising the lighthouses, so we're going to use this BIM integrated approach to look at the Kish, Fastnet, and Tusker Rocks, Tusker Rock Lighthouse, where we're going to introduce humidity and thermal temperature sensors to identify what are the implications of removing their diesel gensets and placing renewable energy power sources to meet the power demands of these lighthouses. So that will inform both the structural health of the buildings, and also be able to advise on what the best renewable sources or resources are to look at the lighthouses. So I'll finish up by a quick introduction to another project, the GeoBIM project, where we're monitoring historic retaining structures in Cove. We've just started this project, and it's funded by GSI Ireland, and we're undertaking it through InfraWorks. We're going to integrate sensor data and again structural health data in Cove. So that's quite an exciting project as well. So that's my presentation. If anyone wants to get in touch, you can catch me at michaeloshay@ucc.e. And thanks very much to everyone.
Thank you,
best
Michael.
of luck for the next couple of days.
Thank you. And of course, what the fascinating presentation, and I'm sure it just shows you the appeal of BIM and its application, not just in construction but across all built assets. And actually, just referring there to Michael at the very end in his paper, one of the things that the gathering has really proved to achieve is to bring together all the research in the built environment into one space in Ireland, and that's something that hasn't been there before. So thank you very much, Michael. I'm sure there'll be a number of presentations or questions for you later on. So we're going to move to our second presentation. I understand this might be a video that we're going to play. Is that correct? Okay, so this is the presentation is the UK BIM Framework, Standards and Guidance to Implement Information Management Throughout the Life Cycle Costing. Just very briefly, for those that don't understand what the UK BIM Framework is, it's basically a framework to support the rollout of ISO 19650. We need one in Ireland as well, so we can learn an awful lot from the UK framework. So when we're ready, we'll run that video.
Welcome to this presentation about the UK BIM Framework. I'm Sarah Davidson and I'm a teaching academic at the University of Nottingham. I'm also a member of the UK BIM Alliance executive team and sit on BSI's Committee for Construction Design, Modelling and Data Exchange.
And I'm David Churcher and I'm the Director of Hitherwood Consulting. I'm a UK BIM Alliance ambassador, a UK expert on the ISO working group developing ISO 19650 and was author of parts 1 and 3. I also sit on BSI's Committee for Digitalizing Construction and on the CEN committee that has been developing European guidance for ISO 19650. Along with Anne Kemp, Sarah and I are co-editors of the UK's guidance supporting ISO 19650, which we will talk about shortly.
The UK BIM Framework is a collaboration between the British Standards Institute, BSI, the Centre for Digital Built Britain, CDBB, and the UK BIM Alliance. The UK BIM Framework provides the approach to implementing information management using BIM for the UK. You may be familiar with the term BIM Level 2, which was used to refer to the way of working supported by the 119.2 suite of standards, which evolved between 2007 with the release of BS 1192 and 2018 with the release of PAS 1192 Part 6. The term BIM Level 2 has now been superseded by the UK BIM Framework, which is primarily based on the ISO 19650 series of standards, which David will talk about in a moment. Parts 1 and 2 of ISO 19650 were released in 2018, and Parts 3 and 5 were released in 2020. The UK BIM Framework is supported through the Construction Playbook, which was published in December 2020.
The UK BIM Framework brings together 3 different types of content: standards, guidance, and supporting resources. Experience has shown us that all 3 of these elements are needed for successful digital transformation. There are 8 standards in the UK BIM Framework, a mixture of international standards on the left and national standards on the right. The international standards are the current parts of ISO 19650 series, and at present this includes parts 1, 2, 3 and 5. The national standards are the 2 remaining parts of our 1192 series, part 4, which defines our approach to COBie, and part 6, which sets out how health and safety information is used within the information management process. There are also the 2 parts of BS 8536, which recommend how facilities and asset managers engage with the information management process, and also describes the requirements of soft landings for UK government projects. This suite of standards has been in flux for the last 9 years, as new standards have been written and published at both UK and international level. The most recent change has been the issue in February this year of a new national annex to BSEN ISO 19650 Part 2, and this is indicated on the screen with the little red dotted rectangle. This new national annex has updated the UK file naming convention and the status codes to be used with the common data environment. And this addresses industry feedback and known shortcomings from the previous versions of these topics. In addition, we know that the standards will continue to change for at least the next 3 years, as ISO 19650 Part 4 is published next year, and as Part 6 is published hopefully in 2024. And finally, as well, in the UK, we are in the middle of a revision of our BS 8536. So, on top of almost continual change in the standards that need to be understood, we also need to acknowledge that standards in the framework really focus on what has to be achieved and actually say very little about how that is to be done in practice. In addition to that, there is the fact that standards as a whole are usually not written in everyday language. And all of this means that supporting guidance plays an absolutely critical role in helping industry practitioners and clients and asset owners understand what they actually need to do by giving them some pointers on how to achieve that.
The guidance is being developed by a group of dedicated individuals who give their time and expertise for free. The group first got together in 2018 and has seen people undertaking a range of activities, including authoring and providing feedback on content. Anne Kemp, David and I work alongside the guidance group in the managing, editing and publication of the guidance. We've also contributed to the authoring activity, and we work closely with CDBB, who have developed the presentation associated with the PDF guidance. Just recently, we've released the guidance via an online platform, which offers a degree of interaction and should improve the search functionality as the guidance is becoming quite a significant volume of content. And I'll explain more about this in a few minutes.
Guidance for the UK BIM Framework was first issued in April 2019, and this was just 4 months after the first parts of ISO 19650 were published. This took the form of guidance on the concepts, and it largely addressed ISO 19650 Part 1. Guidance on Part 2 followed in July 2019, and this has been updated and expanded regularly since then, initially at 3 monthly intervals. The guidance has been shaped by industry, and we always welcome feedback from the whole community. And if you have any feedback on the guidance, then please do email us directly at guidancefeedback@ukbimframework.org.
Just over a year ago, we were reflecting on the guidance and realised that the 4th edition of Part 2 was 160 plus pages long. And this was really too long, and some of the key feedback from industry was that we needed to make the guidance more accessible. So in July 2020, we developed a new guidance structure, which you can see on screen now. We now have Part 1 guidance setting out the concept of the ISO 19650 series, and in fairness, that's remained largely unchanged since its first publication in 2019. Part 2 guidance considers the specific requirements of ISO 19650 Part 2, and Part 3 guidance explains the requirements of ISO 19650 Part 3.
Guidance for Part 5 has been developed by the Centre for Protection of National Infrastructure, CPNI, in the UK, and is available via their website. And guidance Parts A and F, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, are then intended to cut across the whole of the ISO 19650 series and cover the key themes where we think that more detailed guidance is necessary.
So Guidance A covers the information management function and resources. It explains some of the activities that need to be carried out, and it includes an information management assignment matrix. This sets out all of the information management activities explained in ISO 19650 Part 2 and includes consideration of ISO 19650 Part 5, which is about a security-minded approach. It's a helpful resource to ensure that activities are covered. We're currently working on a scope of services that will work hand in hand with the assignment matrix. Guidance Part A also offers a resource map supporting the information management framework, and this is currently being updated to include resources that are referenced in ISO 19650 Part 3 and Part 5.
Guidance B currently covers open data and building smart standards, and it will also be extended to cover COBE when ISO 19650 Part 4 is published.
Guidance Part C covers the common data environment in terms of workflow and technology. It looks at the assignment of metadata as required by the National Annex to ISO 19650 Part 2, and it's currently being updated to reflect the 2021 National Annex.
Guidance D explains the importance of properly structured information requirements and includes a number of very detailed examples of developing the organisational, asset, project and exchange information requirements.
Guidance Part E currently covers the information standard, the information management protocol and the BIM execution plan to support tendering and appointment activities. It will be extended with content to cover the information standard and guidance about a Part 3 compliant information protocol later this year.
And finally, Guidance Part F explains some of the critical information delivery planning resources. These include the high-level and detailed responsibility matrices, the task information delivery plans, and the master information delivery plan.
The guidance isn't static. We're continuing to extend it as we have capacity as a group and as our practical experience grows. This doesn't mean that we change the nature of key messages of the guidance, more that we bring more depth to it. For example, we will be issuing health and safety related examples of information requirements to support Guidance Part D shortly. Earlier this year, we released an information protocol to support ISO 19650 Part 2. It can be used with standard forms of contract, including those that have a collaboration focus. It can also be used with bespoke forms of contract, and it's drafted in a way which means that it requires minimal alteration and can be used between clients and consultants, clients and contractors, contractors and subcontractors, and so on. To support its implementation, we produce step-by-step guidance, which is available as a standalone document and can be found in Guidance Part E as well. We'll be taking a similar approach when we release the information protocol to support ISO 19650 Part 3 later this year. I mentioned earlier that the guidance is now available via an online platform. This should improve reader navigation with easier links within and between guidance content. It's the same content as that previously provided in the PDF documents, and the list of revisions is clearly cited. We'll continue to evolve user functionality and we'll be exploring persona-based navigation and different layers of guidance in due course.
To conclude, the ISO 19650 series and the UK BIM Framework have both been developed to support the whole life cycle of an asset, including project delivery and asset operation and maintenance. This whole life cycle approach to information is supported by the deliberate development of cross-cutting guidance in the structure of the UK BIM Framework. This acknowledges that clients and practitioners in all disciplines need to use similar methodologies to manage project and asset information.
We hope that this has given you an initial insight into the UK BIM Framework, and we would encourage you to visit the website at www.ukbimframework.org to check out the guidance and other resources such as the information protocol. And if you would like to get involved in the guidance activities or you want to provide feedback on content, then please do get in touch with us at guidancefeedback@ukbimframework.org. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you're all now informed as to what a BIM framework is. And you can probably see now the importance of a similar framework to be developed in Ireland. And more importantly, the need for us to work with our friends in the United Kingdom and all that they have learned in developing their framework. Just wanted to remind you all to use the Q&A function. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see this function. and give you an opportunity to place any questions you have for our speakers. So just to thank David Churcher and Sarah Davison for the excellent video. It just wasn't possible for them to be with us live, such as the nature of how busy people are at the moment. So our third presentation, Dr. Mark Kelly from GoMA Institute of Technology, is looking at enabling a twin transition, digitalization for a circular built environment. This is a topic ourselves that we've been focusing on at CitA in 2021. So over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Many thanks, Alan. I'm delighted to be here today to present some thoughts on the opportunities that exist when considering the digital and circular economy transitions. As Alan said, I'm based in the Department of Building and Civil Engineering, and we have two research groups within the department: the Build 360 research group, which looks at circular economy applications, and the BIM Futures Lead, which looks at all things BIM and digital. Just to mention as well, the GMIT have launched a new Centre for Sustainability, and I'll be given the opportunity to head up that centre over the next couple of years. So next slide, please. So the presentation will cover three main points: the need to move towards a circular built environment and what this may look like, the continuing evolution of the digitalization transition, and some thoughts on the symbiotic relationships between the two. Next slide, please. So the Twin Transitions approach has already been endorsed by the EU across many sectors. The Shaping Europe's Digital Future strategy highlights the role that digital solutions can play in mitigating against climate change and achieving the green agenda. It specifically highlights the role of digitalization in supporting the circular economy through the introduction of product passports, which will inform consumers and industry about the origin, composition, end-of-life handling and recycling of products. The EU Green Deal, with a budget of trillions, aims to transform the EU economy and society to have no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050, to decouple economic growth from resource use and improve the well-being and health of citizens and future generations. It focuses on fresh air, clean water, healthy soil and biodiversity, renovating energy efficient buildings, healthy and affordable food, public transport and cleaner energy. It also focuses on longer lasting products that can be repaired, recycled, reused, and future-proofing employment for a globally competitive and resilient industry. Next slide, please. These aims and objectives are illustrated in the current Horizon Europe research call, which highlights such areas such as digital building permits, waste management, and industrial symbiosis. Next slide, please. So let's consider the circular economy and how it applies to the built environment sector. For too long, the sector has extracted too many resources and produced far too much waste, with recent estimates of construction and demolition waste representing 25 to 30% of all waste generated in the EU. The construction sector is mistakenly believed that recycling demonstrates best practice, but when you examine the waste hierarchy, you see that recycling is in the middle of the hierarchy, with prevention and reuse as the priority sectors. A key reason for this has been the perception of responsibility across the supply chain, with the main contractor often seen as the main responsible party, when in truth it is often too late at the construction phase to make any meaningful impact in relation to waste prevention and circularity. What we need is earlier interventions with stakeholders who can influence everybody across the supply chain, for example, planning authorities and clients. Next slide, please. When discussing the circular economy, it's important to start with something tangible that everybody in the sector understands. And one example of this is waste. And based on the theme of today's talks, waste is also cultural. It is viewed as an inevitable part of the construction process, but its true cost is often underestimated. With building material costs projected to rise by 6 or 7% over the next 12 months, does it really make sense to purchase a material for X amount and then discard some or all of that same material a few weeks or months later at another cost? Next slide, please. When we add in the purchase costs of materials placed in a skip, the true cost starts to become apparent. This does not even begin to consider the associated environmental impacts from processing and transport, and the loss of the inherent value and utility of the material in the first instance. Next slide, please. Which brings me on to defining what a circular built environment would look like. In the 1990s, Stuart Brand developed the concept of building layers, which has gone through several iterations since. but the concept remains essentially the same. View a building as a series of interconnected layers, each with varying needs and lifespans. Add into the mix an understanding of the amount of natural resources extracted globally each year to develop the built environment and the human capital that is invested to design, construct, and operate it. This should hopefully get you to think about value and utility and the importance of maximizing both. Next slide, please. The transition towards a circular built environment requires all supply chain stakeholders to collaborate and play their part, from the developer to the building material supplier to the demolition contractor. One interesting key stakeholder who is not listed in the diagram shown on the slide is the planning authority, and I will explore some opportunities around this in a few slides' time. Next slide, please. RBS have produced a nice diagram that tries to encapsulate the circular economy across the different phases of a project. It is important to highlight the impact of pre-development decisions, whether to retain and refurbish or to demolish a new build, and how the regulatory and planning process can influence these decisions. It is also key to view the existing built environment as a resource, with each building reimagined as a material bank. What is good about the RBS diagram is that it illustrates how one phase flows into another. This highlights the importance of collaboration and consistency. An example of this would be if a pre-demolition audit is prepared, this should inform the preparation of a design phase and the construction phase resource management plan. Next slide, please. So how does the digital transition, which has been happening across the sector for the last number of years, relate to the circular economy agenda? Obviously, there's been enormous progress on the technological side of things. The 2021 report from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development summarized the range of digital technologies and applications as shown in the diagram there. These include drones, laser scanning, robotics, 3D printing, digital twins, AI, virtual and augmented reality, blockchain, etc., that are currently available to the built environment sector. The key challenge identified in the report is how these digital tools and applications can serve to reduce emissions, reduce resource consumption, and reduce costs across the value chain, whilst also increasing productivity. The progress which has been made is illustrated by Scanscale's BIM linked site robot, the collaborative on-site construction robot. It comprises a robust mobile base, site sensing technology, and BIM linked software systems that enable it to navigate safely and accurately around a construction site, where it can be operated manually or autonomously. And if you click on the link on the right-hand side there, and you get the slides, you'll be able to see a nice short video of that. Next slide, please. In addition, a 2021 paper which looked at developing a framework for circular digital built environment identified 10 technologies and examined their applicability across 3 general phases of pre-use, use, and next use. What is interesting is that anecdotally, digital technologies have tended to be used in a myopic fashion, i.e. just focusing on energy, or in an ad hoc manner using a BIM model to inform a pre-demolition audit when it comes to sustainability application. What we need now is move towards a more holistic approach. Next slide, please. So how do we merge the many applications, life cycle applications of BIM and digital technologies with the circular economy principles across the full supply chain? Next slide, please. One way is to revisit the role of planning authorities and clients in the early stages of a development. Back in May, the UK Construction Innovation Hub launched the Local Authorities Soft Landings Interactive Navigator, which aims to help local authorities to maximize the value of their assets and buildings. The GSL framework asks and answers key questions about how a building or asset will be used to ensure that the user needs are central to the design and construction process. It also supports a smooth transition between design and construction teams and the people that operate and use buildings and facilities. This would seem to be a perfect vehicle for the integration of circular planning statements, which were developed by London's Mayor's Office in 2020. These statements are to be included in development proposals and are based on the principles of conserving resources, increasing efficiency, and sustainable sourcing, designing to eliminate waste and manage waste or resources sustainability and at the highest value. The circular economy statement should run throughout the different phases in the development process, at the pre-application or outline planning stage, with a draft focusing on the strategic approach, at the full application phase, with a detailed circular economy statement focusing on how the circular economy will be addressed through detailed design, and at the post-planning completion updates, which would detail progress against the targets and commitments. Next slide, please. And you can move through the bullet points as well, Elena, please. So these key requirements could be embedded into any digital plan of work. And the key requirements are a strategic approach, which are outlined in the table 1 of the guidance, outlining circular economy commitments, developing a bill of materials, and finally a recycling and waste reporting form. Next slide, please. Similarly, we need to look at how the new best practice guidelines can align with BIM requirements and projects by integrating them into EIRs, BEPs, PIM, and AIM information requirements. These new guidelines are currently under the final draft phase and should be released in the next couple of months. And they put a clear emphasis on prevention and the potential impact of early stage interventions. They also stress the need for collaboration and consistency across the different phases, which mirrors the aims and objectives of introducing a digital process. Next slide, please. The UK Green Building Council has produced an excellent resource back in 2017 for clients who wish to lead a circular economy transition. Again, these core guiding principles could be aligned and embedded into any BIM requirements and documentation. There is a clear opportunity in Ireland for the public sector as a client to utilise these guidelines to lead on this in Ireland. Next slide, please. These opportunities bring us back to the concept of material and building passports, which I presented on during the 2019 BIM gathering in Galway. The challenge now is to move from the theoretical to the practical to clearly identify what these passports could be used for and what impact it could have. So you see there on the slide a list of different opportunities, and these can be expanded on the next slide. Next slide, please. So as you can see from the list of opportunities, they're endless, but what we need now is more real-world examples of how these passports work in practice to develop an evidence base that can influence the overall process and supply chain. I'm referring to Michael's presentation earlier on the Kish Lighthouse. It would seem that there's a significant opportunity to develop a building passport around that case study as well. Next slide, please. Digital passports have also been recommended as a performance and safety tool in various reports following the Grenfell tragedy, tower tragedy in the UK, and they've been identified as a vehicle for more precise data-driven decisions in the planning process. Next slide, please. So where do we stand? It seems that there's a clear opportunity to embrace digitalization as an enabler towards a circular built environment, as both are based around collaboration, good information management, and intervening at the earliest stage possible. This will need leadership at all levels, but especially from planning authorities and clients who can set out core guiding principles and requirements for the rest of the value chain that will enable the sector to build on the evidence base from which to develop best practice. I want to thank you for your attention, and thank you to Alan and the CitA team for the invitation to speak today. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, or you can contact me on the email show. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark. Some very powerful messages there for the industry. I suppose 3 very different presentations, but 3 strategically important ones. When we talk about cultural shift in attitudes, we're not just talking about cultural shift for built environment professionals, contractors, but people like Irish lighthouses, you know, that need to think about digitalization to maybe to be more efficient in the way that they manage their physical assets. But also, like in the second presentation, this UK BIM framework is absolutely critically important for Ireland. You know, we're all now signing up to this ISO 19650 information management standards, and as a result, we have to have a framework in Ireland. There's no debate on that. So we've got to learn from the UK, and we've got to work with our colleagues in the UK so that we can, because we're working in these countries seamlessly anyway. And in the third presentation, you know, the whole cultural shift, I mean, sustainability, circular economy, this is what it's all about. Our planet is suffering. You know, we're not looking after our environment. And, you know, if we've got smart technologies that can help create a more sustainable, cleaner environment, then we should use them. And indeed, in 2021, CitA have, alongside the Chartered Institute of Building, GMIT, and the Irish Green Building Council, have designed a circular economy series and a digital technology series. Actually, the 10 technologies that Mark referred to are the 10 that we're talking about this year. Only last week, we spoke about robotics and so on. So, you know, if you're ever in doubt about what CitA do, or our relevance, just look at what we're doing. It's very important. So over to you, Michael. Michael, how are Irish lighthouses? Do they see the benefit here?
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I think they do, because initially this was the development of the BIM model was kind of it was applied to win a tender, really, for us, to provide this digital, and they really liked that idea of being able to to physically to see in 3D what their lighthouse was, and then every time we've kind of gone back to them with a new idea of, maybe we could put all the historical structural health documents on there and represent it. They were very interested. And only about 2 months ago, it's the first time that they've come to us and said, look, we're thinking of decarbonising Tusker, Fastnet and Kish. Could this work in a BIM environment, or how could you help with us? So
dare I say, they shouldn't be thinking about it, they should be doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, there's no thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely.
We're at a crisis here. So could you just give us a sense, how do Irish lighthouses currently, monitor their physical assets? Give us a sense of how they do it today.
Inspections. It's helicopters, guys out doing their annual inspections.
All terribly expensive.
Yeah,
all sounds very expensive.
Yeah.
Helicopters. And
the same, like I guess the big thing is the diesel gensets. All these offshore ones they're diesel powered, so they have to get refueled. So that's where they're really looking to get rid of diesel gensets and see what's to be able to do that the most efficient way possible, and to ensure that the lighthouses don't degrade as a result of moving.
But they're largely not manned now, isn't that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, they're most. So all those aren't manned.
There's an element of automation there, isn't there?
Exactly.
Yeah. And this is just another example of the Irish government, putting their, money where their mouth is, and actually investing in this. I mean, we can have all of the research projects and we keep going around. We know it's an unproductive sector. We know there are shortages of skilled labor and all this type of thing. We know all this, but what we got to do is just invest in the infrastructure we have. So, Michael, wishing you every best with that. I mean, we don't have any particular questions. I might come back to you maybe just before the end there. Mark, what is Ireland's response to the circular economy? You mentioned EPA. I mean, are we taking it seriously in construction?
Yeah, I think over the last 12 months, you mentioned the CitA series in collaboration with ourselves and the CIB and the Irish Green Building Council. The last 12 months have seen a lot. We've had the National Circular Economy Strategy. We have a Circular Economy Bill going through. I think the public procurement, green procurement has just been released. So there is a sort of momentum behind it. But, being honest, from a construction sector point of view, what the construction sector deals is in practicalities. So they need to see an evidence base around it. And often, as with BIM and digital, a lot of the leader in the space has actually been stakeholders which have been further down the supply chain, of being main contractors and so on. And what we really need to emphasize now is there's an opportunity for the public sector as a client, but also other large public sector or other private sector clients to start leading on this and to drive it. And also the local authorities through the regional management plans and development plans to embed circular economy and digitalization principles within that, because that influences planning. And if it's in fairness,
and in fairness, a lot of the major contractors appear to be employing, experts in that arena. And indeed, on the 7th of October, I know John Siskinson will be presenting their vision of a sustainable future for the industry. It reminds me a little bit of, that cartoon where you've got the guy on the cart and he's got square wheels, and there's somebody standing beside him saying, and he's a circular wheel, and he says, why don't you try this innovation? Oh no, I'm too busy. I've got to get going. The industry is flat out. I see it every day. The construction sites, stop and innovate, invest in and listen, and look at the technologies, look at sustainability. It just worries me that the industry, that the authorities are not taking the time to be more innovative. I hope I don't sound overcritical here now, but no, a really fascinating insight there. Do we have any questions? I don't think we've any particular questions, but maybe back to Michael, you know, digital twins. This is the kind of the topic at the moment that seems to be capturing everyone's attention. I know Dr. Claire Penny will be talking a little bit about this, but doesn't it make sense to create a digital twin of these lighthouses?
It definitely does, yeah. And I suppose what we're looking at as well with that Cove project is we're kind of trying to see how far you can push the digital twin in terms of, you know, town level or city level. And I know you referenced the CDBB, the Centre for Digital Built Britain.
Yeah.
You know, we were taking inspiration from that. Like, you know, some of the digital twins they've developed in terms of infrastructure it's where we need to go, really. You know, it's almost going to city planning level now, town planning level.
No, we have all the important people here this week, you know. That's the key message. But the idea that, you know, you can have this sort of control tower managing all of the physical assets or the critical assets that Irish lighthouses have would make an awful lot of sense. I'm just wondering, in your research, Michael, did you come across any international examples of where other countries might be already doing this?
For that specific application, not really. No, there's been a lot of work on these historic lighthouses in the UK. Trinity House, which is the UK version of Irish Lights, have done a lot of studies, but they haven't linked the two of them together, if you know what I mean. It's the first time we've have a virtual representation with sensors and the lighthouse, and trying to get them all to talk to each other. So not really. I suppose other offshore applications, you'll see now with the floating offshore wind industry taking off. That's where it's really going to come in. That's going to be a huge aspect of it.
I mean, it was it was a fascinating documentary. Was it last year that RTE did that one on the Irish lighthouses?
Yeah, there's a second series coming this year.
Yeah, but the pressure, the elements that impact on those lighthouses is extraordinary. So we have, I think, one comment coming in here. A big step in changing the cultural shift and adopting BIM across the AEC sector. I suppose the big question is, will the government introduce a BIM mandate? Well, I don't know. I personally believe there should, but I think it's important that the timing of that is conducive with the readiness of public sector authorities, and also a study on the readiness of the SME community. So there's no doubt that the middle and larger size firms are ready. So we just need to be conscious of the sensitivities of SMEs in particular. But, you know, listen, I'm going to wrap things up there. I want to again thank you for joining us this morning. Don't forget to pick the streams and to build your schedule. We do really appreciate the contribution from Mark and Michael this morning. Thank you, and have a good day, and hope you can engage with other presentations, and also to our friends in the UK, David and Sarah, who couldn't join us, but hopefully it was an informative presentation. So thank you.